Just search.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the GSMC Sports Network. Hope you guys enjoyed the first two segments talking Thursday Night Football. We will get back to it kind of at the end of this show. We're going to take a little bit of a respite from it and switch over to continuing my personal rankings at different skill positions for this upcoming week in fantasy football. Continuing with the wide receivers, a lot of good matchups, a lot of good divisional matchups, mind you, kind of giving you a little bit of a hint of who I'm going to talk about in this segment. But overall, the four players who I've compiled have interesting matchups. They're pretty tough, if you ask me, and you might say that the opposing teams and opposing defenses they'll be facing might even have the upper hand in each of them. But that's why I like presenting who I believe will stand out based off of matchups again. This is before even week 3 starts, and I see these receivers in action. I just see the matchups, so you can say whatever you want in the comments about these rankings, but these are my personal picks for week 4. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. And the first one kind of feels like a no-brainer. This is the first divisional game that I will mention. Very big one, a lot of implications. One team trying to prove that they are, in fact, for real. The other team potentially getting their quarterback back, and this one making it a little bit more interesting. But Justin Jefferson, wrong graphic there. Justin Jefferson going up against the Packers in a game that he hasn't really had much action in, if you think about it. Injury bug has hit him in these games, and he's going up against Jair Alexander, who also, ironically, has had a couple of injury bugs in these divisional games. So it should be a very interesting match, but the reason why I like it is because the comfortability that Sam Darnold has in knowing that Justin Jefferson is his number one receiver, most importantly, also knowing that even though Justin Jefferson is going to get the lion's share of targets, it's what he does with them that's going to be most important. He's not necessarily going to have a touchdown in every play, but he is someone who can keep the ball moving through the air for Sam Darnold in this offense. And that's why I like him. This game he feels like he's going to be more of a reliable target than, a scoring threat, because I think the Vikings' game plan is going to be oriented around setting the tone on the ground. Aaron Jones is a dominant back. We talked about him this week before. And, keeping Sam Darnold on schedule. And if it kind of translates to a dink and dunk approach, so be it. But then again, you always have to compensate for Justin Jefferson. I think that you're not always going to see the Jefferson-Alexander matchup. They're going to try and move around Justin Jefferson, move him to the perimeter sometime, move him to the slot, try and confuse this defense because he's always their get-out-of-jail-free card. And that's the most important factor in this game. So he could have a slow day to start off with, but just know that he's always that deep threat for Sam Darnold. As Tap to Learn says, Aaron Jones may go off even just to get the Lambeau leap he's promised Vikings fans. That would be an epic moment for my man Aaron Jones, going back into Lambeau and scoring a touchdown and doing the revenge Lambeau leap there. But I think that both of these guys are primed for big days. I think that if you utilize Aaron Jones early, he's going to have a pretty big game. And if you use Justin Jefferson late, he's going to be the surprise factor against this Packers defense, who, mind you, have been one of the most impressive in terms of takeaways in the league. They've had 7 interceptions. So you have to keep ahead of schedule if you're Kevin O'Connell. You have to realize that you've got to run to pass in this game. It's not always going to be easy against that Packers secondary. So look for him early to run the ball. But Justin Jefferson, when he's on the field, he's going to have an immediate impact, whether positively or negatively. Then the next guy I want to talk about, hopefully he doesn't gash us too much, Amon-Ra St. Brown. This is kind of one of those moments where he's someone I want to root for as he's on my fantasy team. I just love him as a wide receiver in general, but he is going up against my Seattle Seahawks. But I am going to have an unbiased opinion on him in terms of a fantasy perspective. He's had a pretty decent season, albeit, against decent competition. But he hasn't really been the guy who was an all-pro last year just yet. And I feel like in this game he has the opportunity to, because this game actually is more important for both of these teams than you think. For the Seahawks, they want to prove that they're for real in the NFC at the very least. Move to 4-0. And for the Lions, this feels like a prove-it game for the rest of their offense outside of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. When I look at what the Lions offense has done, it's been much more run dominant. And I don't know if because Jared Goff is just not feeling it right now, or it's because, they feel like they can dominate on the ground more often than not. But you still have a weapon like Amon-Ra St. Brown who can move the chains, is smart about that, more intelligent rather than, trying to get the superstar plays. And, you have Jameson Williams as well, who's a huge factor in this offense as a deep threat. But at the end of the day, I feel like the reason why Amon-Ra St. Brown is my play in this game is because of his ability to kind of calm the rhythm of this offense. Calm Jared Goff, most importantly, down as well. Because I love that early on, Jared Goff likes to have the deep shot with Jameson Williams available to him. But Amon-Ra is just that guy who, on 3rd and long, 2nd and long, is always open and reliable. He's kind of like that guy in your middle school gym class who is just always going to get open and do what's best for the team, most importantly. So look for him to be a sneaky play. I hope that he has a good fantasy game, but in real life, I'm still rooting for my Seahawks, but I'm also rooting for my man Amon-Ra. I think that he will have a big game, depending on the game plan, because I feel like the Seattle defense right now, as far as good as it's been, hasn't really played anyone. So we're going to see if the Lions feel like they want to run the football, so be it. But the pass game might be a more viable option to beat Seattle. So look for Amon-Ra St. Brown to be an X factor either way. Next guy I want to talk about kind of had a slower start to the season than I expected, but is going up against a pretty easy defense this week who just got blown out against the Bills on Monday Night Football, and that is Nico Collins. You see, I'm not worried necessarily about the Texans, especially seeing as to how they're in a very weak division this year. I have no faith in any of the teams outside of Houston in wanting to win this division. So expect this game to be a huge blow, and I expect Nico Collins to be a huge part of that. I feel like that game was just a matter of Brian Flores being in his bag defensively for Minnesota more than it's an indictment of C.J. Stroud. And for some reason, he does kind of have one or two of those games a season where he's kind of slow to make better reads than he does in better games for him. So I feel like that's one of those games where he's going to put it aside, put it in his past, and just focus on the season ahead. And Nico Collins is always going to be his number one target. I was kind of questioning how this wide receiver room would pan out, but for now it's looked like Nico Collins has been the best guy as Frizz ILL, or Frizzy LL, sorry if I pronounced it incorrectly. Hey, how's it going, man? Hey to you, my friend. Welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast family. If you have any more questions, comments, concerns about anything I talk about, feel free to leave them in the comments section, my man. Let's get back to Nico Collins for a quick second. I feel like in the past couple of games, he's had the most impressive quote-unquote stat lines out of any Texans receiver, and that's saying something because, it hasn't been pretty offensively for Houston by any means so far, but this game is against the Jags, and I feel like as the season progresses, Nico Collins and C.J. Stroud will continue to be on the same page. I feel like that whole kind of muddled nature that Stephon Diggs brought to the room will subside. He seems to be very happy in this situation. So as long as that kind of situation and status is comfortable, then there's no reason to think why Nico Collins can't mature and progress this season in terms of fantasy implications as well. But the last receiver, we talked about this guy already, and I still think he's a viable option either way. I still think he warrants, the wide receiver 1-2 status in fantasy that he deserves, and that is CeeDee Lamb. I think that, he really has nothing to lose in tomorrow night's game. He really has nothing to lose because I'm going to say something that might shock a couple of people, but when you really think about it, as Frizzy does have a question for me, a trade question at that. Right on, my man. I want to pick up James Conner, was going to offer Devontae Smith, and likely is that too much? He does have Calvin Ridley. That's a very interesting trade. And I think that if you switch Calvin Ridley and Devontae Smith, that trade can still go through. We talk about James Conner a lot on the show. Seems to be a very popular hot commodity in terms of fantasy football right now. And he should be, because he is someone who at the end of the day, I don't really know what the Cardinals offense is right now or what it can be. But at the end of the day, he is someone who can keep it on schedule at the very least. I feel like, yes, the Arizona pass game is going to get more potent as the weeks go on. But it also can be a little bit kind of bad and all muddy if James Conner isn't keeping it on schedule. So that's the reason why I feel like a lot of people are valuing him, and you're right in valuing him. So I would say if you get rid of Ridley, keep Devontae Smith. I kind of like him. Obviously, that concussion will keep him out for at least a game. But I like him as a wide receiver too. And likely, I feel like his value is going to kind of plummet a little bit as the season goes on for Baltimore. So if you switch out Ridley and Devontae Smith, I feel like that trade is very likely to go through. But thank you for your comment, my man. Good luck to you in all your fantasy football exploits this year. But CeeDee Lamb is someone who, I feel like he's not the problem. And the thing I always want to say, thank you, Frizzy ILL, for leaving that nice comment. I feel like I'm about to say really sums up not just who CeeDee Lamb is, but it sums up what makes the Cowboys such a controversial team. CeeDee Lamb, at the end of the day, helps the Cowboys offense more. The Cowboys offense helps him. Because if you think about it, the Cowboys offense really isn't necessarily predicated by, the stars they do have to just go through one player. So I feel like the Cowboys organization thinks that CeeDee Lamb is the end-all, be-all for this offense. And it's not true. At least that's my opinion. It's not necessarily, Mike McCarthy's and Jerry Jones' opinion, but it's my opinion. So if you're CeeDee Lamb, you're always going to have a big game. You're always going to be seen as the star. But to what effect for other guys? And yes, I feel like in this game against the Giants team that you want to win against and that you should win against comfortably, I feel like CeeDee Lamb, I'm okay with being the star. But I feel like as weeks go on, I'm going to kind of wean off the CeeDee Lamb hype a little bit. I'm not that invested in him having success over and over again, and I'm not ready to say that I'm comfortable with him having that much success in this offense just because, he is their star player. But take it with a grain of salt. I really think that, all four of these guys have point to prove this week against teams that either they should perform against or teams that you want to make a statement against. And so make of this what you will. This is just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments as well, because there are a lot of guys you could say warrant a start for you. But coming up next, we look at some fantasy tight ends, and that will be the last of the skill position players for my personal rankings. We'll be right back on the other side after this short break with that.